Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley, the Avs have acquired Lars Eller in exchange for a 2025 second-round pick. The Washington Capitals are retaining 31% of Lars Eller's cap hit. That puts his hit just shy of $2.5 million on this Avalanche roster. Megan, this is being described by Jared Bednar as he referred to him as a third-line center. Either way you shake it, this is a bottom six center, great penalty killer. They're looking for him to come in, be hard to play against, and really kind of fill a need in that bottom six. Your kind of initial reactions to this deal now that we have the full details of what went out, what's being retained, all of that.
I think it was a wise decision. I understand the criticisms that are being made sort of in immediate response to it. You don't love to see another second round pick go to the wayside, but we talk about what it costs to win a cup now, and there are things that you have to part with in order to do that. And you have to ask yourself then what you would have been more comfortable with, because the reality of the situation is health has been an unknown factor, and not knowing the status of Darren Helm and if he will become available, and being realistic about the expectations to set around Ben Meyers are really important in this conversation, and acknowledging the ways in which somebody, one, is going to bolster the penalty kill, which I don't think has been an issue as of late, but it is something that they had as a strength in the playoffs last year that you want to make sure that is going to be another strength and repeat some of the success of why that worked for them with special teams. And then the other part of it is getting a winger is going to be different from getting a centerman. The defensive responsibilities that you can count on from a player like Lars Eller, beyond just the penalty kill, are going to be really important when it comes to team defense, which we've alluded to, another thing that has brought them success, especially deep in the playoffs. The other part of that is depth and how line by line, that is another thing that helped them, especially in the Western Conference Final. And again, not knowing Darren Helm's status, and I just don't think Ben Meyers was ever realistically going to be even the fourth line center option.
I agree.
I envisioned at best 13th forward, someone they carry along throughout the playoffs, but he was not someone that I think would have been equipped to go on this run with them regularly. The veteran experienced player is something that, whether you like it or not, this front office and this team values so much.
Jared Bednar was stoked on this.
100%. Like, he even circled back to the Jack Johnson conversation. Like, we've talked at length at how playoff experience matters in his eyes. And I trust his judgment on that because of the success last year. And honestly, you look at the Pagliano edition and see the ways in which someone like him was a voice in this room and became a really important player. It's a similar depth addition in my eyes for that reason.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the conversation around Ben Meyers, or at least a Ben Meyers type within this organization, you know, pick whoever you want, combined with the uncertainty of Darren Helm, that really is what I look at here, because you and I have both had some people already in our Twitter mentions, oh, well, you know, Ben Meyers, I guess, you know, Ben Meyers just can kiss his job away. I'm with you. I think that was maybe in the same way that we had lofty hopes and expectations for Alex Newhook to be able to take a huge leap in his game in just his second year to be the second line center. I think we maybe had those same kind of lofty hopes after what we saw to Ben Meyers, that, hey, maybe this kid can come out and turn into a legitimate NHL center in his rookie year. I don't think he's been bad. I think he's generated, obviously, the noted troubles putting the puck actually in the net. That aside, I think Ben Meyers has been good, but I just don't think that you would find an NHL GM out there anywhere who would say, I'm more comfortable with first-year Ben Meyers based on what we've seen over Stanley Cup champion, veteran forward Lars Eller. You know, I mean, 15-goal scorer multiple times, scored the cup-winning goal with the Washington Capitals back in 2019. It's just the obvious, and especially since you didn't have to send anything back out in terms of roster players or prospects, and you didn't have to send Ben Meyers. I don't see how this is anything but an upgrade, and you're talking about a second-round pick 3 drafts from now. That's literally that's a throwaway. That's a player that, if everything goes phenomenally, you are 5 to 7 years out from seeing them on your NHL roster if everything goes perfect. The Avs are probably, you know, in the back half of their window at that point, you know, trying to stay competitive, things like that. I think this is a move that makes a lot of sense in their bottom six. Now, you and I were talking on our way over here to get set up to do all of this. I do still think that there are two glaring holes on this Avalanche roster. So I've got my phone out because you just don't know what's going to happen here.
No, you're right.
I do still think that the Avs are in need of a legitimate top or middle six forward, and then they still do need a defenseman. John Klingberg is being held out tonight of the Anaheim lineup due to trade-related reasons. That has been a name that several of us have been told keep an eye on, and when you're hearing it from this many different members of the media, that means that there's some sources out there that are hearing things. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. I think if you make those two additions, top six forward, top or middle six forward, I should say, and then another top six defenseman, I think this Lars Eller deal looks even better. The offensive numbers aren't great for him this year, but you need a depth guy, and I like you kind of, likening that to the Jack Johnson acquisition, but maybe with a little bit higher ceiling, that you just need a depth guy that you can put down there and feel good, especially if Darren Helm can't go.
I have two things too that spring to mind. One is the acknowledgement that the market value for this type of player is going to vary from year to year, and it depends too on the time that the acquisition is made. We're kind of later into this year's deadline in that a lot of moves happen so early in this year's deadline that market value is established kind of early on. And I talk about the differences between a middle six wing versus a middle six centerman and why that is going to come at a slightly higher tax. And inflation is real, and the Stanley Cup tax, like doing business with the reigning Stanley Cup champion, is probably going to come at a cost. Because I even look at with 31% retain, still feels a little steep if he does end up being like a fourth line center. It sounds like they might target him for that third line, but we'll see how that actually shakes out. Even with 31% retained, that like just shy of 2.5 is a little steep, but I do think it's a Stanley Cup champion tax too that's being applied on there, and it is the market value. And then the other thing is giving up the 2025 second round pick is not a permanent choice because it is a couple years out. This is something that, depending on how prospect development goes, because it is definitely getting thinner in Loveland and just the prospect pool in general, but if the development of some other prospect doesn't go according to plan, it is something that they can use to make future moves towards getting picks back in return. Especially, there's a scouting staff here that knows a lot more about what is the projected 2025 draft at this point in time, that maybe they're not seeing the value. It is a huge loss right now. However, if that changed, I think that's something that the Avs can pivot and make adjustments to regain picks back in 2025. We are dealing with 2023 right now, but I just don't think we should feel super locked into that either.
I think that's a phenomenal point, Megan, and I think I actually am going to disagree with you. I don't think it's that steep, purely because it is 2025, and what I just said a minute ago about you still being 5 to 7 years out. If the Avs had a 2024 third, I would be willing to bet that maybe would have gotten it over the hump, or maybe even a 2023 third, a little bit of a lesser pick, more, sooner. I just think it was, hey, if you're going to, in addition to everything you said about dealing with the defending Stanley Cup champs and all of that, I do think there was a part of this. It's like, okay, well, hey, if you're asking us to push this return out to 2025, we're going to need that pick to be a little bit higher because you're asking us to wait a long time on not only making the pick, but then waiting for the prospect to develop. And then I think it's a phenomenal point of, with it being far enough out in the future, you are in no way locked into not having a second round pick in 2025. We see teams do that all the time, make moves to regain, recapture those picks with, kind of tongue in cheek here with the way that they've dealt with Washington in the past. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they get this exact same pick back in a year or two at a deadline, something like that. So I'm actually not too concerned with that pick because it is still so far out. Megan, I do. The more I sit here and think about this, I think this is a good deal for the Avs. Like I said, assuming more deals follow. I still think they need a little bit help up the lineup a bit on both forward and D. As long as they address one or both of those needs, I think this is a nice depth pickup. If this ends up being the only thing they do between now and Friday, maybe a little bit of a letdown.
I'm really counting on at least, at minimum, one more move. But I like the idea of two additional. One to satisfy a need defensively, and then the other somewhere middle six. I would love it to be like a top six wing, if that's possible, if that feels within reach still. But I do think that they're not finished, and I hope that people are rest assured I really doubt that they're pushed.
And here's the one thing I will say, and it was just because of the verbiage you used, kind of sprung a thought. For me, this is what I think. Do you agree? There really isn't. The hole is second line center. That's the obvious hole. Do you see a second line center out there, a bona fide second line center?
No, it would have to be would have had to have been a slam dunk fit, because I know the cost for that would have been steep.
Right.
And at this point, the slam dunk fit just isn't out there anymore.
I agree.
So whatever they would be giving up for a centerman option that's out there, they're probably asking this player to play a little bit up in the lineup from what they're accustomed to. That's not so different from the JT Compher compensation, honestly, which is why, knowing it comes at an expense, I'm just not favorable of that as much anymore. If there are options like a second, third line wing, that would make a lot more sense.
I agree.
So that's where I'm at with it.
And I'm going to use this name as an example in terms of like the type of player, Max Domi. That kind of tier where he can play on the wall, he can play in the middle, top, middle. Again, I'm not necessarily saying Max Domi, but that type of player, that archetype of player up front, and then really kind of additional punch on the back. I think you're spot on, Megan. That's going to do it here. Avs acquire Lars Eller, a 2025 second-round pick, going back the other way. Washington retaining 31%. I do just have to make one last comment. Timo Meier is on the ice behind us for the Devils, skating with their scratches and injured players, so he won't go tonight. Confirmed earlier today, but Timo Meier is out here. I believe wearing number 96.
Looks like it.
Number 96 for the Devils, Timo Meier. Won't see him in Denver tonight, but that has maybe been the biggest acquisition of the deadline. And then whatever the Maple Leafs are doing every day.
Jeez.
More craziness coming at you guys pretty much every day between now and Friday. Hannah asked me, she goes, "Oh, are you free for dinner on Thursday?" And I was like, maybe. As of right now, I am. So we'll keep you guys updated every step of the way. Lars Eller, officially a Colorado Avalanche.